Today's guest on A Life and a Living is Miha Matlievski. And Miha is somebody who's been on the show before and somebody I've got a huge amount of time for. He's had enormous experience as an entrepreneur. He's had enormous experience as a coach to entrepreneurs. He is very often called the fail coach, which doesn't sound terribly a great title to have, but it actually is because of his ability to bounce back, but also to help businesses understand their failings and what they can do about it to actually make sure that they can go forward. And I just find it really interesting talking to Miha because he's always got a great sense about him in terms of the simplicity of business. And he does have, and not underestimating, any of the difficulties or challenges, but he's got a very, very clear idea of how the approach you should take, the approach you take in setting it up, the approach you take in scaling it from one level to another. So he really does have a lot of experience of doing this. He also understands all the things that you need to have in place and the pillars you need to have in place in order to be able to scale your business from one level to the next. So great experience both as an entrepreneur himself and as a coach to entrepreneurs who build businesses where he has helped them exit the business very, very successfully from a financial perspective. So I really encourage you to sit back and listen to this very interesting interview with Miha. Miha, thank you so much indeed for joining us today on the podcast. It's a great pleasure to have you back.
Well, John, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's always so lovely chatting with you. So I'm very much excited for what this episode will bring.
Well, I'm looking forward to it too. Just a bit of background, you might just explain a little bit about yourself, but you're the founder of Fail Coach, and you're also the founder of Operation Firehouse. So maybe just tell people a little bit quickly about your background and how you've got to be where you are now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Fail Coach is kind of like my nickname. Everybody knows me as the Fail Coach. That's how they started calling me because of all my massive failures and the comebacks from those, and how I always talk about developing healthy relationship with failure and so on. But that's more like my personal brand thing that just fell into my lap through losing a lot of money and time and energy in the past. And then, I have other businesses. Operation Firehouse is one of them. It's a very high level mastermind for 7-figure entrepreneurs to put systems in place for scalability and potential exit, whether that's out of the business or selling it to somebody or just becoming passive shareholder. But I have plenty of other ventures around, and they all have different brands, but Fail Coach is kind of like the umbrella and more like my personal story.
Okay. I'm going to come back because I want to talk about the businesses and also the things that you're seeing right now, because we're in a very, interesting is kind of one way to describe it, but certainly kind of uncharted waters for any of us. But what you say that you teach entrepreneurs is the 4-hour-a-week CEO system.
Yes.
So maybe you might just explain what that is, because that surely is the absolute ultimate for any CEO to work 4 hours, or is it actually working 4 hours?
Well, I mean, the thing is, we have to understand what CEO is. In a big corporation, they have very little, time that they spend in the business. They are mostly brand ambassadors. They go out there, meet presidents, talk on stages, do some very high level stuff, and really just guide the C-level team and everything that they have beneath them. Now, my focus is more the 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneurs. And in those cases, CEO wears a few different hats. So when we are talking about the CEO role, the 4-hour-a-week is just to spend managing your company. Of course, you will do PR stuff. Of course, you will do other things. And so the hours will be longer. But, the other stuff is what most entrepreneurs really love and enjoy doing anyway. It's the managing part that they hate: the systems, the processes, leadership, accountability, hiring right people to put in the positions and so on. And so what we help them is to put a system in place that supports them in becoming the 4-hour-a-week CEO. But that doesn't mean that then they don't do anything else. They
Right.
still do PR and events and so on, but just the management part, which after they grow to 9 figures would be taken away by a COO anyway. But for 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneurs, it just doesn't make sense to have such a complicated C-level structure.
Okay. So when you talk about those 4 hours, what are the key things that you get the CEO to focus in on during those 4 hours?
Okay, so the first part is laying down the foundation. That takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months, depending on how active the company is in laying down the foundations. Once you have the foundation, it's basically a 3-step thing. On Friday afternoon, you get reports from all the key people, and they get reports from their key people. Over the weekend or Monday morning, you spend 2 hours going through those reports and really just spending some time in the firehouse, not on the fireground, but really thinking, reflecting, planning, strategizing, and so on. So 2 to 3 hours spent there. And then you kick it off Monday morning with super clear way of how you will steer the ship going forward into the next week. So it's almost like the weekly sprints that are known from IT world. On Friday, you get the data. Over the weekend, you crunch the data. On Monday, you steer the ship in the right direction. And when you surround yourself with a good system and great people in the C-level structure that's beneath you, and you empower them for them to be the right leaders, there's really no need for you to do much on a normal week. Of course, every now and then something might happen, a big problem, and you have to spend another hour, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a particular week. But for a normal week, that's all you have to do.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because I would imagine that when you're working then with CEOs, I mean, and these are entrepreneurs who primarily have kind of created their own business. That's not something, what you're talking about in those 4 hours, it's not something that comes natural to them, is it?
No, it doesn't. They're all over the place. Most companies that we start working with, we start with chaos because so much is dependent on the entrepreneur. There's lack of systems, lack of processes. There are no routines in place. They might have, 10 project managers, and each project manager does PM stuff the way they want to do it. So no structure. And then when you have people underneath project managers and you switch them from project to project, and they might work with a few different project managers in a year, or even at same time working on 2 different projects, you just create chaos of reporting, of delegating, of communicating, and all of that stuff. So putting a system in place will, the first benefit, it will greatly increase your profitability, even if you don't acquire a single client. But the thing is that your processes will be so much leaner and structured, and just by that you will increase your cash flow or increase your profitability. And with the same amount of people, you can then start gathering new clients, and that will even further increase your cash flow. Most of the clients that we start working with have a very shaky cash flow, and it's not predictable, and sometimes it's a plus, sometimes it's a minus, sometimes they're around 0, but it's hanging there. It's not predictable, sustainable, positive cash flow that they can really count on to fuel the further growth.
And I know that you very much specialize in really, scaling businesses. That's whether it's 6 to 7 to 8 and on that journey. And I'm just wondering, Miha, when you're doing that, what are the pillar, because that's a very specific skill, because generally speaking, people have, they work on the and they get it to a certain level, but then to get it to the next level and the next level and the next level, it takes different types of skills and approaches. But I'm just wondering, are there kind of key pillars that you need to make sure are in place in order to allow the business to scale?
Well, I mean, of course, there are, especially when it comes to soft skills part, and in the hard part, of course, a good system in place. Now, of course, you won't create a 9-figure system in a 6-figure company, but you want to think about the future and you want to create it so that each next level you just add on top of it, instead of doing a complete reorganization each time that you go from 50 to 500 employees, and from 500 to 5,000, or whatever those milestones might be, where you need to change things up. So when you're building it from the start, thinking this will be a scalable business, we will go to 8 figures and 9 figures and 10 figures, well, then you can build a system in a way that it supports further growth. And of course, a whole lot of that is on the soft side. So soft skills, values, company culture. The sooner you put those foundational pieces in place, the easier the growth will be, and the more they will support you on that growth.
Mm. I was talking to somebody recently, and their point was, because they were talking about selling businesses, and they were saying that one of the key things is at the very outset, when you're setting up a business, to be really clear about, well, what's your exit mechanism. Would you share that view, or do you think is that something that just evolves over a period?
Well, I mean, you don't have to know that in the beginning, in terms of, you just have to understand that there is time that is needed to put exit scenarios in place. So you might start a business because you love it and you want to go for it until you retire. But then you reach a certain point and you start saying, you know what? I might really want to just sell it and exit. I have other things that I became passionate about along this journey. You just have to realize that the process will not be, oh, today I made a decision, tomorrow we are going to try and go for exit. You first need to create an exit strategy. You had to implement the whole thing, because if it's not prepared in the right way, the new buyer will probably want to lock you in for a few years. So if you want to avoid that, I mean, just this year, I had 2 exits with my clients that I helped. And in both companies, shareholders were able to walk away. And there were some really big. One was $55 million. The other one was 150 million euros exit. And they were able to walk away. But we started with the strategy and planning, preparation, laying down the right foundations, doing the transitioning in not overnight way, about a year and a half ago. So it takes some time. When you understand that, you can decide anytime you want. Just realize that it will take you a year to 2 years to prepare your business to be exitable without you being locked in. Because when you're creating a business for yourself and you're going for cash flow, that's one strategy how you do everything in business. When you go for exit, you might want to focus on completely different things in different KPIs, again, based on who's buying you. You need to understand who's your ideal exit buyer.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, because if you go for a VC, they're looking for different KPIs than a competitor. Competitor might buy you just to get access to your client. So you want to grow your client base. For a VC, they're looking for financial sustainability and further growth potentials. For another type of investor, they might just be looking how they will get through dividend payments the money that they've invested over a 10-year period of time. You have very different types of investors out there, and clearly understanding who's your ideal exit buyer and what they want to see and how they make decisions. That's how you will focus what KPIs you will focus on, and what will be in your balance sheet, and what will be the EBITDA, and so on.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of decisions that you have to make before you start with the exit strategy.
Okay. And for people preparing or thinking about that, what are in your experience, because you've done this so many times, what in your experience are the big mistakes that people make?
Well, the first one is that they don't do initial due diligence. You have to do that, because you need to know where you are. They just go where they think they are. But
Right,
trust me, John, when we do due diligence, it's always very far away from what we heard from the founder, because it's filtered. It's not that they're intentionally lying, it's just how they see things. So when we do that initial due diligence, things pop up, and then you need to make a decision, because if you pivot too many times, then throughout the journey, that will make it harder for everybody, and you might not get there. So you need to make some very hard decisions. For example, who do I want to exit to? How do I want to do this? How do I want to do that? And I would say probably the biggest struggle is letting go, because for you to be able to sell and not be locked in, you can't be the person everybody comes to and the person who has the greatest influence of cash flow generating activities. Letting go is the hardest thing. I'm usually say it must be like, you know, when you are a mom and your baby boy becomes 18 and it's time for them, you know, to go into the world, that letting go, just trusting. Yeah, I created good foundations in this little guy, and now it's time for him to go out there and experience the world. And it's very similar, because we entrepreneurs, we look at our businesses like our babies, and at some point they have to mature, and we have to trust the system that everything will be okay.
Oh, there's no doubt we get very emotionally connected to the business that we have created. There's no doubt about that. When you look at I mean, you've been doing this for quite some time, Miha, but if you look over the recent times, I mean, my belief is that no company strategy has survived COVID completely intact. Some has changed dramatically, some have changed a little bit. But how do you see, in the work that you're doing, how do you see the impact of COVID, both positive and negative?
Well, I mean, I always had very different approach to business development. I mean, I have many friends who are business coaches, great business coaches, and, you know, they focus 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 2-year strategy plan and so on. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't do part of that as well, but I'm that proverbial startup founder. Deep down inside me, I'm that scaling startup founder. And when you're scaling, things are completely different than running a company that's growing 10-20% year over year, the normal company. So it's different personality traits or different soft skills that you need to have, which is resilience, being open to failure, testing a whole lot, learning, growing. You spend way more time reflecting and figuring things out than actually doing things on the fire ground. So the approach to business that I love is very different to what most business books will teach you about and so on. But because of the approach, you can pivot very quickly. You can adopt to change. You don't go down that negative roller coaster when, you know, something that worked for 5 years suddenly isn't working. You're immediately bouncing back. You're strategizing, planning, pivoting, testing, trying, talking. So it's a very different approach. Well, I can tell you that with all of my past clients and current clients, they all had increase in revenue and profitability throughout 2020. Which was very, very amazing. And some of them had to pivot, some of them had to change, I don't know, from clients in one country to just figuring clients in a different country. So a lot of them had big changes, big pivots. But because of how we structure things, because I'm always a fan of lean, and even when it's a bigger company, structuring things as if it's a combination of a few startups within that organization. They were really able to shift quickly, change quickly, and find themselves in a better product market fit and grow throughout. I mean, one company, we just recently did a case study. We just now have to translate it into English. They did 300% increase in revenue in 2020.
Wow.
So yeah,
can be done. So Do I take it from what you said there, if I'm interpreting what you're saying, Mia, that if you go back a number of years, where you talk about, your strategy, and you'd write a 5-year or a 10-year strategy. My, I mean, I don't believe that that is possible to do any longer. I think that it's a much shorter time horizon. And I'm just curious, when you're strategizing with your clients, what sort of time horizon are you talking about?
It's not so much time horizon. We lay down a vision, we lay down a path, we lay down, the big building blocks of what needs to happen, but then we are very agile in between. It's monthly, weekly sprints. It's a lot of, I love the story about the fire ground and firehouse, and most entrepreneurs spend a whole lot of time on the fire ground and very little in the firehouse. But that's where you win the battle with the fire. The more you train, the more you prepare, the more you strategize, and all of that. So it's a combination of that. And we have a lot of daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly routines that my clients do. And so it's almost, you are always prepared for whatever comes your way. So, when this Corona thing happened, I mean, nobody likes it, but it was just, another instance. It was just more global. If you look at it from, a reality standpoint, there's always something happening in the world. Maybe we are not affected by it, but maybe there are wars around the world where companies need to adopt. Maybe there's something else. Maybe it's something unique just to your company. Maybe your biggest client, something happened to them. So it's always something. This was just more global, and everybody was affected by it. But it's no different than anything else that can happen and that can come your way and that can completely ruin your product market fit. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg can wake up tomorrow, change something in the algorithm, and things can, like what happened with Apple and Facebook of just a few months ago. It's a huge shift in the marketing industry that will have to happen. It's not Corona, but even things like that can have tremendous impact on a industry, plus all the clients that are heavily reliant on Facebook marketing. So things are always happening. Sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they're smaller, but with the right foundation and with the right mindset and approach to those things happening, it's just another day.
Yeah. When you talk about that, just when I was listening to you, and I agree with you, because I think you're right. You've got to have a vision of where you want to get to, where you want to be, or what the business you want the business to look like. And then you've got to have a strategy, but you've got to be able to kind of review, renew, and that strategy as you go. To be able to do that, that takes a certain type of leader who can lead in that environment. So when you're looking at, what are the prerequisites, what are the skills, what are the abilities, the talents that a leader needs to have in order to lead the business effectively through that, what comes to your mind? What do you look for in the leader?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's nothing you can't learn. Now, of course, if you have some of that already that you were born in, like let's say good communication skills. Communication is a big struggle for many. Of course, it will be a little bit harder if you are very introverted. It will be much easier if you are a chatty person anyway. But it's nothing that can't be learned. I wouldn't say that our typical client has many advantages when it comes to that type of leader, but we just go through it. They see the value of being a leader like that and how much more adaptable and faster they can operate. And we learn those skills. And most often it's the soft skills, it's personality traits, it's values, it's doing a lot of inner work, it's emotional intelligence, but the first three pillars, not the fourth one, which everybody just want to go for, managing others, but really focusing on the first three. It's really leading by example, having integrity, knowing how to properly communicate so that it's growth orientated communication, learning, growing, and not, oh, you said this, and fighting and arguing. So it's really things that anybody can learn. Of course, for some it might be easier because of some leverages that they might have. For some it will be a little bit harder, but it's nothing you can't really learn.
Yeah. What I'm most fascinated by, Miha, when I talk to you, and you and I know each other reasonably well, is that I always walk away thinking that you make things simple. You don't make it complicated. And you have a very clear way of working with people that I think is really helpful and really, really empowering to them. Because to you, business is not complex. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not complex. Isn't that true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thank you for the compliment, John. But yeah, things, I mean, when you look at it, when you look at business, I mean, it's really simple. First, you need some good foundations in you, the entrepreneur, or you need to at least start working on them. Then you need to create a product market fit. Then you have to validate it. Then once that's validated, you start with communication strategy. Once you grew organically a little bit and you have some cash flow, you start working on your growth plan, building a team, putting a system in place, and you go from there on. Of course, things become a little bit more complex when you go from 7 to 8, and even more complex when you go from 8 to 9 figures, and so on. You're becoming more and more corporate, even though you don't have to go to that extreme with most corporations. So you can still be lean and entrepreneurial, but of course you need more foundation, stronger foundation, and a system that supports you in that growth. But it really isn't hard. I mean, most of the things are common sense, being human, not being too much in your head, and really just doing a few simple things on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, a whole lot of reflection. I mean, it's more what people skip. John, I'm sure you know plenty of people who do daily journaling at the end of the day. And it's an amazing exercise, but it's not enough. So when you just write things down and you don't go one step deeper, okay, so this is what I wrote, but what are my lessons? How can I grow from today? And then another step deeper, which is, okay, how can I create action steps? And maybe just a simple reminder or something to implement all these lessons tomorrow. But most people stop at step 1, daily journaling. And they write same things day after day after day after day, and nothing changes. Now you have people that go one step further and actually learn the lessons, but there's no good in that if you then don't plan out how you will implement that. And it's really people don't follow through on things. That's mostly the case.
That's very, very true. You're talking about journaling there, which is kind of part of many people's daily habits. I'm just curious, what are your daily rituals that serve you well?
Well, I mean, one of them is morning routine. So that's mandatory 7 days a week. And then throughout the day, I have 2 things that I do every half an hour. So one is energy check-in, because energy is the source for any productivity. I mean, I can have a lot of time, but if my energy is low, I ain't gonna do much. And if my energy is high, well, then I will perform really well, even if I don't have that much time. So energy check-in. So, and being very mindful about what level my energy, even like interview like this, I'm absolutely loving talking to you, John. But after this interview, I will probably, some energy will be drawn away from me because of, being focused, being mindful, answering questions and so on. So I'll probably do a quick 5-minute mindful meditation, or maybe I'll go outside with my doggies and just play a little bit. And that gives me a lot of energy. I'll have a glass of water, maybe I'll have a few nuts, and that will help me regain my energy so that I'm prepared for what's coming next. And then the second one is being mindful. So I want to stay as much in the driver's seat as I can throughout the day. And then I have 2 more things. One is the daily, reflect learn and plan from lessons. So what I just mentioned a little bit earlier. And then I have a sleep routine because it's more important than the morning routine. Because if I want to have a good morning routine, well, it starts the night before. So about an hour before I want to go to sleep, I'll make myself tea, wind down, turn off the devices, like just really get myself into that sleeping mode so that I'm relaxed. I put out everything that's in my brain. I call that idea inbox, which is really just a voice recorder on my phone, and I just put all the ideas there. I'll sort them tomorrow, but I just want to get them out so that I'm not in bed mulling over things and I'm like, oh, I have to remember this, I can't forget it. So I do all of that before I go to bed. And then, you sleep like a baby. When you sleep like a baby, your day starts amazingly well and you can have a good morning routine.
Okay. So your morning routine is what exactly? I mean, I know you're talking about what you do during the day. What is your morning routine?
Oh, I mean, well, the first thing is, of course, the bathroom. And then I go downstairs, I make myself coffee. I let the doggies out so they can go play in the garden. Well, one thing is I have this thing called Miha in your pocket, where I help people through Voxer with micro coaching in between sessions. So the first thing in the morning, because I have a lot of US clients and I'm based in Europe, I go through that and I reply all of that. And then I do some meditation, I do some stretching and playing with my doggies. And then I really sit down and prepare 3 to 5 big things that I have to do today that will get me one step closer to my goal.
Excellent. And also, I mean, I love what you do during the day in terms of the energy, because I think that's hugely important. Other question to ask everybody is a book, or I think you're going to give me 2 books, but a book that's had an impact upon you. What is the book and what was the impact?
Yeah, well, I love the soft stuff. So mindfulness, flow, and all of those. So there's a whole bunch of those books. But if I can really pinpoint it to 2 books, one would be The 5 Love Languages. And yes, it's love. Yes, it will help you with your wife or with your husband, but it's just an amazing book on understanding yourself, diving into who I really am, and then finding ways to communicate with people. What do I want? What do they want? And bridging those gaps and just opening the communication and showing people that you care, and them showing you that they care about you. Because so many times in our business and in our private life, we show people things the way we would want them, but they don't understand it. And they show us things how they understand them, but we don't understand them. And there's just so much conflict because we are not talking, because we are not communicating, because we don't go deeper and explain, not just, oh, I want freedom. No, for me, freedom is this and this and this. Then people can understand us. Then we can understand other people. And the other one is Fuck It, which is really, a Western version of Zen Buddhism.
Yeah.
I use it. I use the word every day to let go, because letting go is such an important process when you're an entrepreneur. You set a goal and then you let go. You focus on the process. That's how you achieve a goal, not by obsessing about the goal, but not doing the process and other things as well. So those would be, and they're so easy and quick to read and fun to read. I mean, it takes literally a couple of hours for both of them together, and you can get so much out of it.
Well, listen, that's great. That is fantastic. Miha, this has been a great pleasure again. It's always a great pleasure to have you here. Where can people get in touch with you?
Well, the easiest is on LinkedIn, and they can just find me there. I do my own account. They can watch the LinkedIn lives that I'm doing, which you, John, was and will be again my guest. And just reach out to me there. We can have a chat. We can jump on a call. And from there, we can see if and what.
Great. Well, listen, we'll put all of that in the show notes so people can get in touch with you. But Miha, Thank you again for being a great guest once more on the show. It's been a real pleasure to see you.
Thank you, John. It was an absolute pleasure being your guest. Thank you so much for inviting me.